You're now diving into the fish tank.
Sitting down with Seth Living, OJ, Juice Man.
Welcome back to the Fish Tank right here on the Miami Dolphins podcast network. Seth Levitt with OJ McDuffie, who looks like he's in mid-season form. Praise Juice, how you feeling, man?
I'm feeling great, man. It's almost game time, isn't it?
It is game time. We're right in the middle of it. It's exciting. It's kind of weird, no preseason, and here we are playing ball, and but there's nothing better. There's nothing better, man. I wish we could be out there smelling the grass and hearing the guys collide and everything else, but this will have to do. We'll Zoom it and watch it from TV, but it's fun to be in season. But when we're in the tank, it's always fun to take a look back. And, you knew this guy even before I did, Juice. And the PR side, how do I put it? He was a big pain in the ass to the PR guys. He was a hell of a reporter. He kept us on our toes and has been an unbelievable friend to the Fish Tank since we started, since day one. He's listened to every episode, gives me the critiques, gives me some ideas. Jason Cole, welcome to the tank.
I have arrived. This is beautiful. I love this podcast more than any other podcast I listen to, and there are a lot.
Appreciate that.
But this is number one, and to be here finally, I've been on a lot of things, ESPN, a lot of other stuff. No, this is it. This is home. This is
great, man.
That's awesome, man. That's awesome, bro.
So, Juice, guys who get drafted, right? And they, Zach can tell you every linebacker that was drafted ahead of him, whatever. How pissed off are you when you're hearing Hyde and Armando and Darlington? Are you tired of hearing other media guys that get on here before you?
It was, I just figured you were waiting for the best.
Okay, I like it.
That you were waiting for the ultimate journey through coverage of the Dolphins. And you had to warm up to me because I'm not, let's just say, I'm not for everybody. And Juice and Seth will tell you that. I am
That's
not.
A fair point.
I think the best way it was put is, I think Zach Thomas once came up to me and goes, you got a nickname off of your initials, JC. We call you Jumper Cables because you're always trying to start some shit. And I was like, yeah, that's true. I can't argue with that.
And how can we not mention the great Zach Thomas, who was in that draft class as well, and we know what happened when you and Zach got together on the basketball court. But since we're talking about sources, what's this thing about Zach and Cheetos and paranoia and things like that?
Well, the paranoia, we talked about the paranoia earlier, and he'd always he would tell you something and he'd forget you to tell you something. You referred to that a little bit. But I just love, the thing I loved about Zach is the notebooks, man. The pile of notebooks. He would write down notes for preseason games. He would want to look good. He just worked at it so hard. And you guys talked about it when Zach was on the show.
Yep.
But just admired it. But it started so early. It started back in college, and he would before he got really into nutrition once he got to the NFL. So in college, he'd go buy a bag of Cheetos, and he would get the game film. And so he'd be eating the Cheetos, writing down his notes, eating the Cheetos, writing down the notes. And then he would turn off the switch, right, without wiping his hands. So this house, throughout the entire house that he was renting, he had 3 roommates. There's Cheeto crud and dust on every one of the switches throughout the entire house. All the light switches were that yellowy, orange, gooey Cheetos color. So that to me was that's the sign of you're so into it, you don't even care what the house looks like. It's disgusting. And that's kind of that tells me what you need to know about Zach Thomas.
Cheetos.
He just had Cheeto dust everywhere. And it would have happened in the Dolphins facility if he hadn't have improved his diet.
Fair point. So now, Jason, you have a Hall of Fame vote.
I do.
And I know that you have for years you always tell me, I just want to get Zach in the room. I just want to get Zach in the room. And
we got him in the room this year.
Did get him in the room this year. And we can all only hope that he gets that jacket here sooner than later.
Mm-hmm.
Do you say this is all you need to know about Zach Thomas and tell him the Cheeto dust story?
No, that's
Probably the wrong place.
That ain't enough to get in the Hall of Fame, pal. Okay, that shit ain't enough. Okay, it's a cute story. It's not Hall of Fame worthy. The gold jacket does not get Cheeto.
Because if that's all it takes,
that doesn't happen. Okay, I tell him about like the interceptions, against where he did a backflip into the end zone, or the interception at the 1 yard line against the Raiders, where he catches it and takes one step and he scores, or the times that he's playing games with Peyton Manning at the line of scrimmage and they're calling play, like Peyton's calling a play, Zach is calling it back, Peyton's calling, like you can see like they're on the chalkboard with each other, like trying to figure out who gets the last piece of chalk and who gets to call the play. And that stuff was genius to me, like those kinds of things. And the things that guys like Peyton say about him and how hard he worked at it and how much, he basically, if he had been 6'2" instead of 5'10", he would have been a first round pick. He would have been, right up there with the guys like Brian Urlacher and Ray Lewis, but he wasn't. He was 5'10", and not the most athletically gifted guy, but certainly athletic enough to be on the field all 3 downs and be in coverage, and smarter than anybody that you'll ever see on defense. Now, the defensive guys are not necessarily the brightest guys in the world, and OJ will tell everybody.
Yeah, they're not.
We just had Trace Armstrong on. That's a smart man right there.
Well, yeah, Trace is an exception. He should have played tight end. But, like Zach was just – he's going to get there. And all I know is that last year when I prepare for the Hall of Fame vote, I usually talk to about 300 people every year.
This is fascinating, by the way, Juice. His process,
who have been in and around football for at least 20 years, right? The NFL. Like they were coaches, they were players, they were executives, some kind of combination. You spent 2 decades in the NFL, right? And I survey those people because they know. And let me just say that last year I had 4 coaches from the Patriots staff who coached against Zach. And that was Ivan Fears, Josh McDaniels, Bill Belichick, and Dante Scarnecchia. Zach swept those 4 guys. They all put him in his top 5 last year, all in their top 5. So I feel very confident that someday along the line, I said that during the meeting. So I feel very confident someday Zach's going to get there.
We really have to address the elephant in the room. One of the most memorable encounters that I ever seen, and I think in my life as a sports guy ever, let's just call it an encounter with Gene Atkins.
Oh no, he ran me over.
I know. Let's take it back.
No, he I was the receiver who did the curl route and was just standing. And I didn't know that he was coming across because I didn't have the vision. Like I had lost track of where the safety was, and he just took me out. Like,
wait a minute. So were you defenseless receiver at that point?
Oh, absolutely.
Did that rule exist back then?
The funny thing is, I'm the defenseless receiver, but he was naked and added to the whole thing.
I didn't know that.
What set him off so much? What set him off?
Here's the dumbest of the dumbest things ever. I wrote a column in which I was basically defending Gene, because at the time it was the salary cap had just come into place, right? And so he had all these rules about who could have contracts done and who couldn't. And long story short is, if you had signed a long-term contract before the start of the salary cap, the team could not restructure your contract. That was the rule. If you signed a contract after the start, which is in the 93 season, the team could redo your contract. So I think this is 94, 95, I think 95. So some player grouses to me about, they just redid Gene's contract, but they're not redoing mine. And I'm not going to say who the player was.
Well, you can't. Wait a minute. It's 20 years later, man. You can't reveal sources.
No, I never.
The statute of limitations on this thing.
The statute of limitation hasn't.
Because they'll never trust me again if I say it. So,
True.
Player complaint. The player says at the time he hasn't even made a Pro Bowl. and they're redoing his contract, which was true.
So wait a minute, narrows it down a little bit to somebody that's made a Pro Bowl.
You guys are fine investigative reporters, and you can figure it out.
Yeah, I think we could also listen back to a previous episode of the Fish Tank.
That's fine. Well, I'm not referencing anything. So
I got you. I got you.
But anyway, so I basically go about and explain why they redid Gene's contract as opposed to redoing other players on the team, and that they couldn't. They were, they were handcuffed by the rules. No fault of Gene's, okay? So don't complain about Gene, and don't grouse about Gene because he did this. Well, Gene, of course, I think Michael Stewart got in his ear, and Michael Stewart was like the puppeteer between those two guys. Michael Stewart thought he was just smart enough to like beat the reporters at the game. And so he planted a bunch of stuff in Gene's mind about how I was ripping him. Gene gets up in the meeting, and I think, OJ, you were in the room when this, and he gets up and he goes, whoever said that shit, I challenged him to a fight in the meeting. Right. No, and everybody's like, what are you talking about?
Something like a get your hand out of my pocket speech he gave.
Yeah, something like that. Yeah. And he's angry about it. And it's like, and then at noon, everybody's like, okay, you're angry at a player. We understand why you're angry at a teammate for saying what he said. Okay, that's fine. But then at noon, we all walk in, or whatever the media availability was. I'm standing like face to face with Steve Weish, now with NFL Network, who was working at the Herald at the time. And all of a sudden, I just get blasted from this side, right? I get hit, knocked over. I'm looking up, and I look up, and there's naked Gene Atkins walking away from me, laughing.
He didn't run. He just kept going.
He hit me, and then he turned around and he walked away. And so I was like, "What the fuck is going on?" Because I was defending Gene, explaining the rules.
Right.
So I walk over and I go, Gene, and I put my hand on his shoulder. What's going on here? He grabs me around the throat and proceeds to choke me in anger. And I'm like, oh shit, this got real. That's when Harvey steps in. And then Harvey, I walk over and I'm like trying to get my bearings about me. I'm talking to Jeff Cross, and all the players are like, what the fuck's going on? And the media is like going, what the hell's going on? I'm just trying to figure this out. And of course, Harvey wisely closed the locker room and figured it out. And just, later he's got me talking to Gene, and I know a lot of players were laughing about when I got hit. And
it was legendary.
A lot of them were like, he deserves that shit.
They're still talking about it.
So,
man, I tell you, man, it was shocking, when that went down, you know what I mean? Because, I was like, it's so weird for me because any time in that locker room, coming out of Penn State, we didn't see any shit like that. We didn't see any problems or instances like that, man. And like we talked about earlier, Jason, that was like, for one, Gene was dead wrong for doing what he did. If you want to be a man, you don't handle it that way in the locker room. You talk to Jason, you talk to whoever you have a conflict with. But it seemed like Gene handled conflict in that manner.
Gene was a really emotional guy.
Yeah, exactly right. So it was shocking to me to even see some shit like that in the locker room, and to witness that. But here's the thing about it, Jason. You said it earlier. You write something and you show up. You know what I mean? Right. And you didn't even know that Gene would have a problem with this. You show up. You know what I mean? And that's you got to be commended for that, bro. Because a lot of these dudes hide behind, especially now, man. People write remotely now, man. It's terrible to see these sources and people writing, and then show up in the locker room and say the same thing. We got a lot of, I call them keyboard tough guys nowadays. You know what I mean?
Sure. Look, it's a different business, and that's okay. I mean, it all works out, and people still watch football, and it's great. And they eat up all the coverage, and that's great. But I think there's a lot there's a lot to be said for just having a guy who goes in and covers the team and asks a lot of hard questions and doesn't always have an opinion. Again, the thing between me and Gene was not really an opinion. It was an explanation that somebody else got in his ear and tried to make it that I was ripping him, and Gene just didn't get it. And that was unfortunate for Gene. And for me, it's a hell of a story, though.
It's a hell of a story. I'm going to jump ahead to Jimmy's final season, 1999, crazy year from start to finish. All right. But I want to start at kind of the beginning of that season.
Yep.
As you know, your former colleague at the Herald, Armando Salguero, was in the tank, told us perhaps one of the most glorious stories ever told here.
Well, it depends on who is part of the board.
Well, that's what I want to know. So for those who
us.
haven't heard it yet, definitely go back and listen to that episode. But essentially, it involved a very angry Jimmy Johnson. It involved certainly a Jason Cole, who's going to share with us your perspective on it.
Fortunately, Jimmy was not naked. He was not.
Not naked. No, he come right off the practice field. He came right off the practice field.
Oh, no. He didn't come off. No. He left the practice field in the middle of practice.
Yes.
To get me and Stu and Harvey and Armando to then get in my shit. Okay.
Yeah.
So what had happened is earlier that year, I mean, the signs that Jimmy had sort of checked out, he had almost quit. He had that thing where he cleared out his office.
He did quit.
And he came back because they brought Wanstead in, to be the babysitter.
Should have quit.
Keep Jimmy happy. That whole thing, that drama, where Wayne had to come in, calm everybody down. And then I think it was June of that year. It was about June of that year. Jimmy skipped out on this meeting of all the coaches in the NFL that was supposed to take place in Atlanta. He sent Wanstead up to that, right, in his stead, because he just wanted to stay in the Keys. He didn't want to leave, right? So I knew about this, didn't write about it. Okay. Then, if you guys remember, the third day or the fourth day of training camp that year, Jimmy called for like a mental health day, right? Like you guys had a scrimmage, and he gave everybody in the entire building the next day off. OJ, am I right?
Yep.
The entire organization. This is training camp. He gives the entire staff and the players the day off. I come into the office that day going, okay, what's going on? Harvey comes down and says, don't write about this. Don't say a word about it, but he gave the entire building the day off. I'm like, he gave the entire building the day off? Like, what? I said, okay. But Harvey pleaded with me to not write about it, just like he pleaded with me.
I don't remember that shit just because Harvey made me go into work. Like,
well, that's your problem with Harvey. But
I'm pretty sure I was there too.
Yeah. So, but Jimmy gave everybody the day off, and I'm like, this is not what's supposed to happen in training camp. I mean, I'm not a player or anything like that, but this is not the sound of a coach who's fully invested in being great, right? And doesn't want to do it. So, but I just stuff it away and just say, okay, we write the season preview, the how's the season going to go. And I slip these two little things in like the 8th or 9th paragraph. The story. I just bury them down, but they're there, right?
Why'd you bury them, Jason? Why'd you bury them? Why'd you put them right?
They're burying them.
Why you put them at the beginning, big dog?
Well, because look. I was known to stir some shit, but you got to pick how you do it sometimes.
Damn right. Yep.
But I was going to make sure it got reported, but I wasn't going to make a big deal about it. But like, is Jimmy invested in this season? Right. That was basically the question. Is he into this? And again, not really, in my view. I read all this stuff, and Jimmy sees that in the 8th or 9th paragraph, and I get a call from Armando, and he goes, Jimmy's going to call you out, and he's going to scream at you. Just don't say a word. I'm like, what the fuck, right? Like, and so, okay, that's great. I show up. I walk on the field, Armando. Jimmy comes marching as soon as he sees me. He marches through all the reporters and does one of these things, right? This does this, and calls us all in. And 13, I lost count at 13 motherfuckers. This is my motherfucking job and my motherfucking this and I'm like, I'm going to call your motherfucking boss. And I'm like, okay, you're losing your mind. Let it go. And I just, as soon as he got done, I walked out on the field. I walked all the way over to the side so that I could just stew in my own juices over there. And I said, okay, we're going to be doing something that's going to get make this right. And that was sort of the beginning of me doing the medical investigation of the team that came out the following year. because I was going to make Jimmy pay for all the things that he had done. But you know, the upshot of it is that you know, he took his lashings. And again, I wrote it. I got to take it. It was his turn to say what he wanted to say. So I wasn't gonna get into a fight with him. I wasn't gonna argue with him. Let him have his say. Let him blow off his steam, because that's my job. I said my piece in the paper that morning, so he gets to say his piece. And I didn't write any article about what he had done, but it became famous. You know, everybody saw that. And Joe Roast was laughing about it all fucking day.